Everyone, thank you for coming along to this session. I'm just going to do a quick introduction and then I'm going to disappear out. These sessions started, I think, about 8 years ago now. And basically there was a lot of turmoil and change on the scene, and our response to that was, let's provide some space. So this workshop is very much a drop-in. It's an opportunity to ask questions of Hal, of others in the room, because at the end of the day, the one thing that we all have together as a shared experience is none of us hatched out of an egg knowing all of this shit. You've got to learn, okay? And it's one of those, you've got to learn both the physical skills of kink and SM, but you've also got to be mindful of the mental skills to some extent, because so much of what we do, society tells you you're not allowed to do. Oh my God, you hit a woman, it's scandal. Oh my God, you can't call her that, or in that, or whatever, okay? So we've got a lot of that pre-programming that we all come to the community with, and this is kind of an opportunity to shed some of those myths, throw some of those things onto the table, and ask people for advice. Because all going to be perfectly honest here, I don't think anyone found themselves on the kink scene and just rocketed off and was a huge success. Okay? You've all got to learn, you all learn from our mistakes. That's one of the most critical things that you can do, and that's why sessions like this exist. So, I'm going to hand you over to Hal, also known as Kebab Punk, who is a practicing therapist and obviously is rather kinky and interested in kink.
Hi guys, he isn't. You know, you shouldn't judge a book by its covers, but hey, that's fine. Hi everyone, my name is Hal. As David said, about 8, and I actually think it's longer than this. Deborah, when she's with her daughters doing the cheerleading competition in the States, I fill her shoes. We both and many other staff members. It's really important for us that you guys have an opportunity to ask questions. Anything to do with mental health. Anything to do with kink, your relationships, vanilla or kinky. This is the whole point. I've been, to be honest, I think I've been a fetishist first, and then the gay thing came later. I'm blaming Tarzan. It was that little leather loincloth between his legs. And I was transfixed. I was 6 years old. And I always remember this, you know, so this lingered on with me. Later on came the gay thing and all. And then, after a process of elimination, one shit job after the other, I ended up focusing on the mental health aspect, because when you have a diagnosis of depression age 12, there's something else you know eventually you can gather from. So I've been working as a therapist for well over a decade. We call ourselves BDSM affirmative therapists. It's basically this, you know. And I work as a person-centered therapist, so transparency is absolutely key. And this is how I work, basically. By the way, if you're wondering what my laptop is about, I'm still suffering from the after effects of brain fog, thanks to you, COVID. So this usually helps a bit. I tend to work as well with men, especially, and men who come from different cultural backgrounds. I was born and brought up in Germany to Turkish parents. So just imagine a kebab with a sauerkraut filling. That's me. Acquired taste, often difficult to digest. And this is sort of what I work with as well, where certain boundaries are crossed, where certain cultures clash, where certain, just what David said, oh my God, you're hitting a woman. And when this tends to be an issue for us, this is sort of what I focus on. So, and it's endlessly fascinating. So, I'm also doing my heavy metal therapy. I also have got my London metal munch. For any one of you guys with excellent taste in music and you're Kingsters, have a look on Fed Life, the London metal munch. I'm doing this one. We have very sweet colleagues who are Kingsters as well at the Raven Records, and we do our heavy metal therapy session there as well, because Ben, who runs the shop, he's also a bit like us, very aware of how important it is to talk things through. So yeah, that's me. over to you guys. Any questions? Hit me. Or you can grab me afterwards. That's perfectly fine too. I know the first question's always a bit difficult. Hello there. And speak up so that everyone can hear you.
Yeah,
Don't be shy.
we're into LAM. But one thing, and we're curious about what groups there are out in the community about supporting it. I know of one group, which is a meetup group, which is okay, but it's very sort of, it's got some aspects to it which lose its appeal to me. I'm just wondering if you or anybody else in the room know of any other support groups, community groups in the preliminary space.
Particularly for Kingsters? Or
Well,
generally?
it is, you know, we find that this is sort of a merge in here.
Yeah,
Kingston's
precisely.
can be preliminary, so there's lots of crossover, isn't there?
I mean, the main thing, guys, and I really recommend, I assume most of you guys are on Fed Life, have a look what munches they are. That is the point. Munches, by definition, are social gatherings where you guys can get to know others. You can find out what floats your boat, what floats the boat from the other one, and get to know yourselves gradually. We really are a community because it just makes it easier. And I do recommend it. There are other groups as well. There are some play parties. Have a look on Fed Life. Usually everything is on there, especially depending on where you guys live. I did mention the heavy metal therapy thing, and there are lots of other munches and sloshes as well. And yeah, there are all kinds of things on Fed Life. Have a look, depending as well what you're into.
Well, simply, you mentioned at the very beginning of your speech, you mentioned that you seem to know where your fetish comes from. You mentioned that when you were 6, you noticed something.
Yeah,
So you know the source of your fetish, yeah?
you just know.
Well, I don't. That's the thing.
Okay.
That's the question. How do I find this? I mean, all my weird sort of.
Yeah.
Weird plethora of fetish.
Yeah.
Because this is not the only one.
Yes.
And I've got no idea where it comes from. I'm completely stupid.
Yeah.
I come from communist Poland family. No high heels, no stockings, nothing
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. I've never seen that.
Yeah.
Especially my family. Absolutely.
I bet.
Vanilla to
Yes.
painfully.
Yeah. You know, that's a valid question.
What happens? When?
But nevertheless, you do realize you might not know fairly soon. I only took myself as an example. Yes, sometimes it takes a bit longer. There is no rush.
I'm 50. I mean, how much longer?
But you got here. Look at your fabulous self. You got there. Yes, sometimes it takes longer.
So you reckon that at some point in my life I can find out, oh, that's when this happened.
You might.
You've got to try.
Sorry?
You've got to try different bits and see what you like.
That's a good question, actually. I kind of knew, really. I was pretty sure what I liked.
Look at all avenues and then see what,
Yeah.
aligns with what you're looking for.
Yes, but where do I take this idea from? The source. I mean, the
It's
question
like you
is.
said, you can go to Munches where a lot of keen people get
I'm
together,
talking to
then you
people.
can share ideas.
That's the point.
I've been asking this question sometimes online and so on, and people usually say, people divide into two categories. One of them say, yeah, I know, I'm pretty sure that I was exposed to some sort of external trigger, and some people say, I don't know, and I'm not necessarily to the
Yeah.
second group. I've got absolutely no idea.
You know,
There's no external
You have a point.
And how the hell do you explain that?
You have a point. It isn't that transparent. It's an explorative process. Sometimes it takes a while until you really realize, it was that.
What if I die before I
There's always a risk, but I doubt it. You're here already. And look at your fabulous self. You are
I
there.
know I enjoyed. I always knew what I would pretty much well.
Yes.
It was the developing, but I was pretty sure from some sort of some deity, UFO,
Yeah.
whoever.
By the way, you have made a valid point. I also come from a more conservative background. If you come from a Muslim background, or if you come from a more politically conservative background like the Communist East, certain things within our diversity spectrum isn't mentioned for political reasons, and that doesn't help. That's true.
So I'm from a Muslim background.
Salam.
My family knew.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
So it's still unknown.
yes, It is.
Still-
And
it's still
this is indeed a
forbidden.
challenge.
You know, it's a forbidden area.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't talk about it.
And you see, this is one of the important things why we gather together regularly, to precisely break through barriers like this. You know, we're not responsible for the sheer backwardness of our previous generations, but we can take charge, we can participate in safe spaces like this. This is the point
There
of
should be more
bunches.
spaces for
Absolutely,
people of other religion,
absolutely.
you know, that can't speak to their
I agree.
family or friends of the same culture.
Absolutely. By the way, I have another group like this. There is, she's a good friend of mine, Mariam Namazi, Council of Ex-Muslims, where people break down those barriers, come together and just are themselves, free from any kind of religious doctrine. So, however, yes, sometimes it requires some research. I'm happy to give you the links later, you know. But there are groups out there, especially in a city like London. If you've got any questions for particular groups that seem to be missing, ask us and we'll help you finding them. So. It's too short, so go on.
So I'll stand up because I'm not that loud. So I've spent about, 25 years in the NHS mental health system, trying to figure out me. And the answer last year was that I'm neurodivergent, so I have autism.
Cool.
So when I look back, I'm like, holy crap. The reason why I like rope is I like the sensation. I'm the person who will go to the beach and dig my feet into the sand and into the stones at Brighton. Anyone who's been to Brighton knows it's a rocky beach. But I enjoy that sensation.
Yeah.
And so I'm learning, oh wait, I like sensation of certain things. And it could be a case that it could be repression or it could be suppression. It could be, like you said, if it's a very traditional thing, it's like maybe you weren't allowed to have long hair growing up because boys were supposed to have short hair.
Yeah, yeah.
You know? Or maybe you weren't allowed to touch certain fabrics, wear certain fabrics because boys are not allowed to, you know, whatever. And just those things, and it's kind of like, it's an exploration. I guess we're all on a journey. It's an exploration to be like,
Absolutely.
oh, I like this thing, and it's not harming me, and it's not harming anyone else. So this is maybe where my kink and my fetish comes from. And the other thing is, like me, I'm like unmasking as well, because we all wear a mask. Neurodivergent, neurotypical, vanilla, fetish, kink, whatever. It's like we all wear a mask, and there comes a point, usually in middle age, where you just go, I'm just gonna do what I want to do as long as I'm not harming myself
Precisely.
or anyone else. I'm just gonna be me, because it's exhausting constantly wear the mask.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've done like breath work or sensory kind of work. It could be that. So it could come from so many different things, you know, and it's just exploring it. And that's why I'm here, to explore.
Wonderful, wonderful. This is precisely how you get to know so much more about yourselves. Keep on having conversations. How did you find out you were into this? How did you know? And eventually the picture comes together. Yeah. So.
And the acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely. And good on you. So.
And I don't blame my conservative parents. I'm like, okay, this is the way how life was for you, but this is the way
Precisely.
how life is for me now.
You see, and I think this is really the bottom the bottom line here, rather. The question is really, what works for me? Find out what works for you. No value judgments, explore. And the more you find out what works for you and what doesn't, the clearer this is going to be. So, go on.
Yeah, just to contribute to the debate about why. I started discovering my kinks a year after I came out, okay? And that worried me, but I had therapy, including hypnotherapy. And I concluded from that, it didn't actually matter why. It was not that important for me. And since then, I come to the conclusion, after another 50 years or so, that what I like and what I am is what I am, and why I am probably doesn't make a whole lot of difference anymore. I can think of reasons that might have went off, but actually, I now know precisely who I am, why I am what I am, and so on. You know, I don't spend a lot of time asking myself why I am.
Yeah. So you also were unmasking yourself basically.
Yeah,
And this is what it's about. It's about being really authentic.
also being really willing to get help. I've always been willing to get help from therapists for one reason or another. The openness to that. And my first therapist, who was a lesbian, for playing catch.
Speak up.
And she put me through hypnotherapy, and I went right back to my childhood. I couldn't find a reason for it. She just said, "You'll do this again. Do it with someone you love." That was cool.
There you go. So it's a bit like a self-help group now, but that's fine too, guys. Seriously. So
I was just going to add on to both what you said. I get your epiphany a year or so ago probably was like, that explains a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, same to me a couple of years ago. I totally agree. Don't be so worried about the why. Focus more on just letting yourself be and giving yourself permission to explore and do it. The older you get, you're 50, I'm older, and it's like, oh hell, there's a lot of decades and a lot of shit that happened over those years that could have contributed to everything. It doesn't matter, because it's being. What really matters is about being comfortable, knowing who yourself, giving yourself permission to be that way, and just embrace the community around you.
yeah, you do realize Oscar Wilde said this at the time. He said, "Be yourself. Who else do you want to be? Everyone else is already taken." I mean, if there's one rule for us Kingsters, it's precisely this. Hence why the concept of consent is so important. It's precisely when we are aware of where our own boundaries are, what we actually don't like, where we can draw the clear boundaries and communicate to others, oh, look, this works for me, this doesn't. Your partners will do so as well, and it's a process where you're going to find out so much about yourself. But don't rush. Don't know why the young kids these days are so much in a rush, guys. Seriously, take your time. So.
How do you deal with shame, both internally and with a partner? It's a bit more difficult to communicate and trying new things, because sometimes I feel like you can kind of see it in other people's eyes and yourself, where like your initial reaction to even thinking about trying something is like no, which it doesn't always mean that you wouldn't like it or you wouldn't consent to it. But again, you wouldn't even know if you can consent without having tried it. So it's a bit of a how do you deal? I think obviously you have to address the shame first and kind of letting yourself accept that. But how do you do it? Because everyone feels like, oh, you just need to accept yourself. Like it's an easy thing. Oh, you just need to do therapy. Like, yeah, we tried to do that.
It doesn't happen instantly, obviously. So you're asking.
In that context, like, what's some useful things you've seen over the years?
So you're asking. You do aware sometimes the bout of shame comes up while you want to play.
I think it's more about you realize it after. That it's related. It's more like initially the reaction is like, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't think I'm going to enjoy it. And then you think, wait, would I? So it's a bit of a tricky. Or again, you see it at the partner where they just like shut off and be like, no, or like whatever.
Guys, if there's one running theme in my therapy work, it's shame. Do you guys, by the way, know the difference? Let me elaborate on this. Do you guys know the difference between shame and guilt? Brené Brown, one of the best TED Talks. Guilt is, oh no, I fucked up. How can I make it good again? Shame is, I am a fuck up, but there's nothing I can do. And this is one of the reasons why shame tends to have history. Shame usually comes from somewhere. It's not something where you notice you might have made a mistake and you feel guilty and then you check with your partner and then it's good again. No, shame is usually used, and this brings us back to particular conservative, doesn't matter if we're talking religious or cultural conservatism, but from those eras, that has been always used as a tool to make us do as expected. And this is one of the joys of being a Kingster, folks. We don't need to play along with this anymore. So the question is, how do we grow out of those patterns? Whenever you notice that you're getting this tinge of shame, you can always tell yourself, I think I'm hearing the voice from my mother, don't I? or however the color your shame has, but it is usually specific. You usually might get a scene from your childhood, from your early teenage years. And you can repeatedly tell yourself, okay, this is where it comes from. I don't need this anymore. You get used to reminding yourself of this, and you continue your play. Especially afterwards, you described what's called as well as sub-drop. So you to have things in place, you know it's going to stabilize you again with your moods. So it could be a good hug. It could be your partner does you a nice cup of tea, puts a blanket over your shoulders, and then you talk it through. Continue this process of constantly reminding yourself, yeah, this is the bullshit from my childhood I don't need anymore. No, I'm going to enjoy this now. This is one of the joys of us being adults, guys. We can make conscious decisions. We can make a conscious decision. What actually is good for me? What do I need and what don't I need anymore? And you can remind yourself repeatedly until it really is part of you, that you don't perpetuate the old voices you might still hear in your head. It's a constant process, and eventually you get used to this, and it's going to be part of basically how you're acting now. So.
Well, someone said that why doesn't matter, but I think in cases like these, why does matter, because again, like your shame has a source where it comes from.
Yeah.
So that's the why. You need to identify where the shame comes from, so you can like take back its power over you. You know, because you take the shame so seriously, because it's like you feel like it's a part of your identity. But if you kind of disengage that, you're like, oh, that's the voice of my mother telling me that when she used to tell me that when I was a teenager, or something like that. Or like my peers used to bully me for this.
Yeah.
That's like you can kind of separate yourself from it, you know, and you can like recognize that, you know, I'm not ashamed, that I'm not like it's not a part of me.
Yeah.
This is just
Spot on.
like a past event. But like there's also like a trap with like over psychoanalyzing yourself. You can also kind of just get stuck in like, oh, I know why, but you don't really do anything about it, or you just keep like repeating the same pattern, which is just like, you just kind of need to get used to having the balance of like being able to just sit with yourself and like be okay with it as you are, but also, you know, finding out why you are and being able to get rid of all the patterns that keep you back.
Yeah. In this context, can I give you another example? What else you could decide to do to grapple with the old shameful voices? If it is person specific, let's say it's your mom in this case, because we talked about this, you could decide and gauge when the right moment comes. You could ask her, by the way, Mum, you know when you said X, Y, and Z when I was 12, have you got any idea how painful this was for me at the time? What was going on for you back then? You can take charge. You can take the initiative and then own it, those old voices, and take the air out of it. Because when you're asking, now us being the adult responsible Kingsters, we can take charge. You can ask specific questions like this. You decide, but she would have to answer you. And just that can be very, very helpful as well to get over those old soundtracks we still have got in our minds. So.
I mean, you don't really even need to ask the person. You can just kind of imagine, like, just empathy for them at the time, because you know it's you know, sometimes parents don't like taking criticism, or just like anyone doesn't really like taking criticism about it, and that they can take it personally. But like, you know, it's again like any insult that anyone has thrown at you, it's never about you. It's an insecurity that they have that they're projecting onto you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Did you want to? Yeah, absolutely. I had mentioned before, we're not responsible what our parents or grandparents haven't been on top of, hence why I've emphasized. Sometimes our backgrounds, they're so fundamentally clash with our needs right now, and it's important that we draw a clear boundary and protect it, protect ourselves. Yeah.
It's like kink. I think we've all got kink in us, whether we're vanilla or we're kink.
Yeah.
I was born, I'm a Muslim, I didn't know anything about kink until I met my husband. He introduced me to kink. You know, sadly he passed 19 months ago. But,
Sorry to hear.
you know, we all learn in the vanilla world. It's not always you meet someone in the kink world. My husband, I met him at work. We used to work together. And we connected. I didn't know until I'd actually to know him better that he was in the kink world.
Yeah.
You know?
Good.
So it's not just coming here. It's like in everyday life, you know, you can find someone that's into kink. You know?
Absolutely. Go on.
Yeah, I'll start. I think for some people the why is important, and for other people the why is not important. So you just, again, it's your journey. You decide what's important for you, and you decide, I want to explore this, and you decide, nah, that doesn't bother me. You know, for example, I'm straight. I don't feel the need to explore how straight I am, you know. So I'm like, that's not important to me. With the mental health, that's important to me. I'm neurodivergent with lots of comorbidities. So I've explored lots of different types of therapy to unlock various aspects of myself. And for some people, I think kink could be that. You explore different kinds of kink fetish. You might be like, ooh, this is interesting. I react this way to this. Or you might be like, oh yeah, that's not for me. I'm not going to explore that anymore. So I think it's looking at it as a journey, and then look at where your interest is. And you're like, oh, maybe I want to explore more about this. So for me, autistic, hyperfocus, special interests, mental health. So I've looked at lots of different therapies, lots of different modalities. I've done private, I've done NHS, I've done charity, you know, different counsellors working in different ways.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a big jigsaw puzzle. So what I tell people is like, in the 20 years, I now have 2,000 therapy skills stored in my brain, so that anytime I get triggered or anytime I'm feeling shame or guilt or whatever, I can soothe myself with those and calm myself down and ground myself back into that baseline, you know, of, okay, yeah, that's something to do with when my father did this or my mother did this, but I'm not in that space right now, and this is what I currently need. So again, it's up to you. It's up to you exploring yourself, you know. And if you have a partner, great. They can hopefully come along with you on the journey. If not, this is something that you can do on your own. You don't necessarily need a partner to do it. It's your journey.
Spot on. Got nothing to add to that. Absolutely. And own it, you know, and own it. Take your time and enjoy it. So, yeah.
Something that I've been really interested in is the interrelationship between neurodivergence, people that have experienced trauma in the past, and how people have found such a safe and supportive environment within the kink community. I was wondering if I could get your perspective on maybe your own findings or observations about those interconnections.
Yeah. When we're talking trauma, see that you've resolved the trauma to a good degree first with a therapist. Because otherwise, us therapists, we call it seepage. Whatever you might not be, this could be the danger otherwise. Whatever you might not be quite on top of it, whatever you might not have processed, could seep into your current relationship. It's important that those two are separated. So the more you're on top of your therapy work regarding the trauma you have, the more you can separate as well what your sexual needs are and what your emotional needs are. You can own it much more. You can separate those two much more. And what was the other part of your question? Sorry.
I was just saying it was interesting how often there's that intersection between people who had experienced trauma, people who have or identify as being neurodivergent, and also becoming part of the kink community, and just how they all seem to have or not all interrelate, but have those interconnected pieces that seem to
Yeah.
pop up quite often.
Yeah, especially when you're neurodivergent. I hope you had a therapist as well who would guide you as well, how you can express whatever was still haunting you, how you were able to process it. As an example, in my therapy space, I have a drawing pad and crayons and pencils. I've had several clients who literally didn't have the words to express what was going on here and here, and they had to express themselves in colors, in shapes, in symbolisms. I had a client who was sitting down and a lot of the times was just expressing it much more physically. So according to your neurodivergence, I hope you're able to as well to express yourself accordingly. And
But I was just wondering, why does there seem to be, so not just even from a personal perspective, but from talking to so many different people and identifying like similar sort of traits, why is it that so many people tend to gravitate and create these wonderful communities together in this sort of sphere? Is it just the acceptance, the communication,
first of all,
relationships?
by default, we're of course acceptance. It doesn't matter if it's a sexual divergence or a neurodiverse one. However, yes, a lot of autistic people, as an example, they really like it when they are in the presence of a dom who gives clear instructions and gives the certainty of it, and then the thinking and the overthinking stops. And then the cortisol levels come down and a bit of silence kicks in, and they're just allowed to feel. This is one of the things I've heard quite a few times, how neurodivergent people actually quite like the certainty that can come with very clearly established boundaries before a session. So I do think there's a correlation here. And as I said, according to your neurodivergence, explore what works for you. This is really part and parcel of this. Hence why it goes so really nicely together. You would have noticed as well when you're talking to other people, we are much more, we know much more about what it actually means to be on the ADHD spectrum, as an example, what it means to be on the autism spectrum, and how we can make this actually part of our play as well. So, and I would recommend whenever you have a play partner, do mention this. Go to the minutest detail and tell exactly what works for you, what doesn't, what you aren't quite sure about. The traffic light symbol, you know about this? Red, no, hands off. Amber, maybe this could work. I'll keep you posted. Green, fuck yeah, let's go. So.
Communication is key.
God, yeah, absolutely. Doesn't work otherwise. Always put the cards on the table.
Just from just my general experience in trauma, that's something I need to explore more, and the autism together. With the trauma, for me, it's kind of like I try to control everything because of the trauma, and it's like when there's a dom, it's kind of like I can relinquish control. I'm relinquishing control. And I'm also, from the autistic perspective, I'm not masking because I'm kind of tied up and I have to let my body do what it's going to do, you know. I did have an episode a few weeks ago where my body decided that it wanted to make me dizzy. And, you know, I just was like, okay, I'm calm. I let my rope master look after me. He put me in the recovery position. He's like, I'm going to get the scissors off. I'm like, no, don't get the scissors. And he looked after me, you know, the aftercare, that kind of thing. And he made me feel incredibly safe. And I felt safe with him, basically. Whereas, say, sometimes I get dizzy at home, I start to panic and freak out. I'm like, oh my God. You know, so it's a completely different, you know, so there's the control aspect, there's the communication aspect, there's the safety aspect, there's the acceptance aspect, and it's like, yeah, if you've been in spaces where you haven't been accepted, where you haven't received clear communication, yeah, come in here, it's like, oh wow, people actually are like this, you know, so.
That's the point. It wouldn't work otherwise. It wouldn't work otherwise, so.
Yeah.
Go on.
So I've got ADHD and it's very similar, there's a crossover. So for me it's a sensory thing and it's also not having to make decisions.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of feeling accepted for who I am is like a big attraction, and sort of like quietening the busy mind, just focusing on sensations, and maybe it's those things. So
By the way, have you guys noticed as well when we're talking neurodivergence, it can be in the context of kink play, but it can also be in the context of you finally allowing yourself to be and just to calm down, so you can just settle within yourself as well a bit. Explore what works for you, seriously. A lot of kinksters, they actually really just cuddle for a while, and then it might get sexual. See what your body tells you. This is one of the things I would really recommend. Try not to rationalize this. None of this is rational. How our brains are networked, it's part of our evolution, really, and what we've gotten from generation to generation. This is much more about finding coping skills, what works for you guys. So explore. So,
Could you just explore that a bit further? The distinction between what you think and what you feel. My Dom always asked me to do a report after a session saying how I felt.
yeah.
It's really important.
Yeah.
And on
It's
the
a
other side,
responsible dom you've got, because the feeling is much more important than what you thought about a session.
my gym trainer always says, listen to your body. And you put those two things together, you begin to.
The reason why your gym trainer said listen to your body is because even the old Greeks, the seat of the soul is around here. The old Egyptian mummies, they were found that the heart was kept in a golden goblet and the brain was sucked out through the nostril and thrown away. Us here in the West, we overemphasized the cognition, the René Descartes, I think, therefore I am. In terms of actually our evolutionary history, this is wrong. We are actually feeling beings that sometimes do some thinking, as opposed to what was assumed for centuries that we were thinking beings that sometimes feel. No, a Buddhist has corrected it to, I think, therefore I am not here. So hence why your Dom was asking you what you were feeling, because he wanted to know, was there any kind of an emotional trajectory? Was there some kind of a catharsis? And this brings us back to none of this is rational. And we do, especially us men, by the way, we are particularly much more head heavy and prone of overthinking things. Whereas for our relationships, that is important, how we feel about ourselves and about the other. How we notice that there's a chemistry, that there's a spark, and what's happening from session to session when we talk and get to know ourselves even better. So yeah, you got a good Dom if I was asking what you were feeling. What did you respond? Just out of interest.
What do I respond? Well, I would say when X happened, I felt this, subspace, when I was in subspace, this particular thing produced this kind of reaction, not up here, but here. It's more about, mostly I'm describing euphoria of one kind or another, or absence of euphoria. That's really what it comes down to. And how I respond to surprise. This is a great surpriser. It's very rare we have a session where there isn't something we haven't done before, or it's
Speak up.
Speak up. And that's the feeling.
Yeah.
Of excitement before
Good.
appreciation. And showing appreciation to him, because aftercare isn't just about me. It's you too.
Yeah, absolutely.
He feels he can come down.
And I think this was one of the reasons as well why your Dom was asking you what were you feeling. He also wanted to make sure that you didn't misstep, that it worked for you as well.
Very, very experienced, far more experienced than I.
It always goes both ways. Always check with yourselves. Does this work for you? Safe words for that reason is supremely important. A simple word like red instantly indicates hands off, let's take a bit of a break, so that you guys know that you're safe, that it works. Or when you're gagged, people have got a set of keys, and if a certain boundary is reached, it's dropped, and then people know. So, yeah.
Dogs
Good.
have self-talk as well. It's not just
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
they feel it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And their care should be as much as.
And any good Dom is also going to say, right, let's take a bit of a break. Let's have a bit of a breather.
Yeah, am I right in assuming that this is assignment the law? That's the,
Yeah, yeah.
So am
The-
I right in assuming
This is
that-
the British equivalent, by the way, what you shared and what you've shared.
Basically, kink is
Am I right in
illegal.
assuming that some time ago, some years ago, like 10 or 8 years ago, the British government introduced this kind of law which literally banned the BDSM activities in the public domain?
Yeah.
Is that true? Yeah? Can you
I'm not particularly sure about the details of the law, but it's been discussed. If you have a look, the Offences Against the Person Act is from 1861. There haven't been any major updates to this.
So the question which I want to ask is sort of very sort of straight. So let's say that I'm the developer of my own website. So
Yeah.
I'm making it. Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm the photographer and I'm the more model. So I'm showing my pictures and some videos.
Yes, you'd have to be very careful what pictures you're putting on there.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes me sort of against the law. It puts me against the law.
It could be. If you have got pictures as an example where you got open wounds, that could be a grey area legally. Anything that isn't transient or trifling.
I'm fine with open wounds. I mean, I can agree with that. But if I'm showing, let's say, pictures of myself made by me on my own website, and it shows like some me, in some sort of positions which is like a bound or I don't know, in some sort of like the BDSM pictures, simple. But no damage to the ball.
Yeah.
No animals, no kids, obviously nothing which is straight illegal. Yeah, just me in a pose which shows some bandage, let's say. Am I still against the law?
From what you describe, it depends. From what you describe, actually, I would say that would be fine.
So someone will approach me and say, yeah, that rope was a little bit too thick.
Isn't this interesting? I generally cannot give you a more precise answer because it does say anything that isn't transient or trifling. Have you noticed, guys, how leisurely, how imprecise the phrasing is?
Exactly. So that shows if you put the person
Take care.
with a blind
Yeah.
hand.
You see, hence why I can't give you a straightforward answer. You could have pictures. Some copper, someone from the force might find objectionable, and some others might not.
Well, a lot of what we do is illegal.
Yes.
in UK law.
So be very mindful what you're posting online.
And especially
Be
what
very
you've got on
careful.
your phone. Because if you get arrested, they will go through your phone.
Yeah.
And if they see
The-
photos,
And by the way, Cosmic is quite good with the legal aspects of this. There are particular workshops as well. If you are worried, I would recommend to approach him. But again, it is purposefully kept that tenuous, that imprecise, so that the police possibly have got a bigger scope to intervene should they fancy doing so. Be careful. I do think this is done by design so that we're all told as should, and that we're not having too much fun and work 40, 50 hours a week. Or maybe I'm getting cynical, but I always thought this is very suspicious when such an old law purposefully hasn't been updated. If you have a look at continental Europe, this is an outlier. So, and this is sadly one of the commonalities. We have to do a lot of navigating. I use that term in my therapy work as well, when I'm getting clients who come from a very conservative cultural or religious background. It's called code switching. Sometimes you really need to adapt to certain codes that are out there, and that's the legal aspect of this. Yes, you guys have to be very mindful what exactly it is you're posting, otherwise you could fall foul of it. I do recommend the legal workshop about the minutiae, about the things, just to keep yourself safe.
How about if I put it as an art?
Sorry?
How about if I insist that this is an art? It's my art exhibition, let's say. What then? Can I do it?
Check first. Art is in the eye of the beholder. And if that's from the police force,
I was talking to someone the other day, there was a Tom of Finland art exhibition.
yeah,
And that is art, absolutely.
yeah.
Not my thing, but that's the demonstration. that is illegal. That they
Yeah.
can't show.
No. Another good.
But I mean, it's art.
Yeah,
But they could not show fists.
Yeah. Another good example is Egon Schiele. Tate Modern couldn't show the posters. So don't count on it just because it's art. It can still be pornographic, especially with purposefully not updated laws like this. This is something that really makes it difficult, especially for Kingsters in this country. Absolutely. So.
Just that when that law was passed in 1861,
Speak up.
trifling and transit may not have met what we think it is.
Yeah.
Then they considered judicial, military,
Yes.
naval,
Definitions.
scholastic approach of it. Poet Swinburne, obsessions with birching, that would have regarded as trivial and transient.
Yeah.
Nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
We are the ones who are more judgmental about what.
But you see, you're right. There would have been different definitions back then. What would have been transient and trifling, but the fact that they haven't specified it until today means sadly we need to be mindful, you know. And I think, let's face it, that's the point, as I said. So.
Like consent isn't consent in the eyes of the law. If you're playing
Yeah.
and your partner has consented,
Yeah.
but then the partner decides to get back on you,
Yeah.
you know, you can
It could
still
be
get in
abused.
trouble.
Technically speaking, even a love bite could be a legal grey area. So yeah, go.
So I was just gonna ask, after the session, and you've had more, sessions with your play partner, what if you fall in love, like you want more from them, more than they can offer outside the session? Have you come across scenarios like that?
Absolutely. Isn't that the wonderful dangers that you could actually fall in love as well with your play partner? Good on you. Don't be shy. What's the problem? Continue the bond and listen to your gut feeling. Yes, that's the whole point.
Awesome.
By the way, this is precisely one of the reasons why I just said, try not to overthink it too much. Yes, our emotions sometimes just wash all over us and we don't have an overview where we're at. Talk it through and be honest. Yeah. It could be, the worst thing that could happen is that your partner says, no, this is not going to work. But he or she might say, yes, actually, wonderful. I actually am grateful you mentioned it. I also feel like this. You never know. Talk. Precisely. Talk it through. Put the cards on the table. Yes, you might be rejected. But even then, you're not any less valuable as a person because someone said no and drew a kind of bit of a boundary. This is part and parcel of this one. So, did I answer your question?
Just again, because I come from like a legal background, a lot of adult entertainers have disclaimers on their website, photos, things like that. That's an aspect that you have to look in. I would suggest that anyone who's going to be having their own website, creating their own content on the internet, do a legal workshop or have a legal advisor because you just don't know who you will offend and trigger, basically.
Yeah.
For example, I'm in a mental health support group. I rarely talk about kink there because I know there are people there who will be triggered by it, and we don't have the resources to help them with that trigger if I was to talk about it. I also stay away from religion in that group, again, because there are people who have trauma associated with it. And I think a lot of this has to do with trauma, the harm that's happened to people, and they might want to keep that private, but you putting it in the public domain might trigger them, that kind of thing. And this was something I struggled to deal with until I went into another therapy called mentalization. What is going on in their brain? Why are they so offended?
Yeah.
And it's like they're so
Very valid
offended
point.
because they might be triggered by something. And I know people use it on social media as like a trifling thing, but being triggered is absolutely terrifying and awful, and in some cases unsafe and dissociating.
Yeah.
So, the laws are this way, the police are a different way, the Crown prosecution decides, well, on the balance of probabilities and how much evidence we have and how much harm has been done, then the judges and the jury, because it's your peers, and kind of our peers, a lot of our peers will be vanilla. That's the honest truth, you know. If we have to be in front of a jury, it'd be like, you know, magistrates, they might have seen more, judges, they might have seen more, be more aware of the cases, but your average person off the street, how would they be feeling? Would they be triggered? Would they be offended? Would they be horrified? So it's not often, it is about us, but it's also how we affect other people. And that's something that I'm having to learn. It's like, oh, I have these autistic things, but they make people feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's why I wear the lanyard, because if they see me fidgeting or doing something, they don't think I'm going to, you know, do something to them. They're like, okay, that. And if they want to avoid me, that's completely fine for their own comfort and safety, and you know, not being triggered. You know, so it's a kind of give and take. You know, and obviously, again, I'm biased, but it's like, when you actually get in the court before a judge and a jury, they're not completely unreasonable, basically. They look at, how harmful is this to the general population?
Yeah.
You know. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
The trigger thing is really important as well. This is, by the way, what I meant with how important it is that we are aware what possibly still haunts us from our childhood days, so that we precisely are safer and are less prone of being triggered in everyday situations. Any therapist gives coping skills in moments like this, and part of this is to get to the root. What are the triggers? Triggers, by definition, are very old reflexes. They have history. And the more aware you are, the less you'll be prone of being triggered when you hear a particular word, when you are in a particular social situation. So.
Yeah, it's an unravelling between what's coming from trauma and what's coming from your kink. So you might have had a patient come to you, to a therapist, and you have to distinguish between whether they're self-harming because it's coming from your trauma, or whether it's because it's a kink they're actually enjoying.
Self-harming. The self-harming is a coping skill in itself. People can control their bodies and the pain regulations. By the way, this is one of the coping skills as well. A lot of neurodiverse people, they kind of resort to this precisely when they're feeling overwhelmed. This is usually what the self-harm manifests as. It's a coping skill. And it's usually something that's easier to control than another aspect of their lives they're not quite on top of yet. By then, it is easier to maybe do some incisions and feel the pain, which makes it much more tangible, as opposed to the real emotional pain that usually sits deeper. I did notice I rarely do trauma therapy because it does take quite a while, and I tend to do a lot of my sessions online. But I do notice over the years, the more people can own and are clearer what the initial pain was, they need to resort lesser to those coping skills like self-harming. And they instead find increasingly the words instead to really express their rage, the grief, the anger that still haunts them. So.
Well, there is like a quite clear difference to me between something being a kink and something being self-harm. For me, like any kind of self-harm, like physical, mental, or anything, when I'm doing it, I'm already like stressed out. I'm in like a bad mental state before. I'm not like thinking about, you know, what's gonna happen after. It's just like I need relief quickly, and I need to find a way to trigger myself, or like something that causes pain, so that I forget about something that is happening to me that I don't want to deal with right now. But with kink, it would be like, you know, I feel okay before that. You know, this is something that I've been thinking about, something that I'm taking aware the risks. I'm not doing this because I'm like seeking like instant relief, and I know that I'm not going to feel like awful afterwards.
Yeah. Isn't there a different impetus, a different drive as well? When you're using, yes, some people do knife play as part of a kink session. That is usually for an emotional catharsis that already implies someone is already at a good point, a good position in their lives, and need to experience a lightness again. Whereas the coping skill, what we're talking about here, that is something because people aren't quite there yet on top of what caused the original pain. So I hope this makes sense. Do you guys see the difference here? One is much more of a kink play where people really get a kick out of it, a joy out of it, whereas the self-harming, that is a coping skill in itself, where people aren't quite on top of their trauma, their original pain. What we have talked about, hence why I've got something here, because this is one of the most important things here that we're sticking to, is boundaries. And if you allow me, I'd like to elaborate, because it just makes it's, and I'd like to show this to you. According to the biggest sexual organ, which we all have got, our brains. We touched upon this, the limbic system here. This is where all our emotions are activated and processed. We regulate, we rein in our emotions at the top level, the prefrontal cortex. So this is the part of the brain that makes sure that we don't punch someone who we don't like, that we don't instantly hump someone who we do like. These are our old, by the way, this was one of the reasons why I said, try not to rationalize things. We're primarily really governed by this part here, by the emotional, by the emotional part of the brain here. Right, I'm going to bring up the picture here. One of the reasons why I bring this up, I came across quotes which highlights this. One of the mantras for us Kingsters is, we don't do shame, which would be here, but we do accountability. Here it is, where we draw the clear boundaries, where we discuss, hey, what works for you, what doesn't. Sorry, have I overstepped a mark? You know, we can't help our feelings, but we can help our actions. This is how you separate things. Another quote which I really liked and instantly made a note of is, people who repress desires often turn suddenly into hypocrites, which would be up here. And this brings us back, especially when we're coming from more conservative backgrounds, where people cannot take accountabilities to how they really feel, what's really going on. And this is one of the things us Kingsters are much good at. We can be transparent. We can openly, emotionally discuss what our needs are, what our do's and don'ts are, and draw boundaries accordingly. The next one, you know, a goddess in the kitchen, a whore in the bedroom. Those separations of certain social expectations. I always remember this quote. Our drives are all here. We've got our evolutionary drives. They're called the 4 Fs: feeding, fighting, fleeing, and fucking. And we're pretty much governed by these all. But it's through our top area here where we really are drawing the clear boundaries and make sure that we're all safe. Another reason why I bring this up to you here, just to give you another example, I've had this a few times in my therapy sessions. A lot of women ask me, look, I'm a very smart woman, I'm a feminist, why do I like being submissive in the bedroom? There are different aspects of ourselves. We have our emotive sexual self, and then we have the one up here, where we are the responsible adults in public, where we have to be doing the code switching, where we naturally speak to our work colleagues much differently than we speak to our younger family members or to our play partners. So there's always a bit of a division here. And this is deeply ingrained within us. And it helps when you guys can separate what your needs are. Something else I always thought was an excellent example under one of the online forums of not embarrassed at all. The exchange goes from a mother, "You talk about sex too much." "Mom, is it because it's not heterosexual sex talk?" "Not at all. You know I love and support you. It's because you taught grandma what fisting is." This is what I mean with code switching. Look, let's go with this. If you have a family lineage where you talk from the get-go honestly about things, then this might be fine, you know. However, I would say if this isn't the case, let grandma consent what you would like to talk about. She might be into other things, you know. She might be into, you know, having a good port, doing some crocheting or macrame, you know. Mind you, if she likes macrame, she's most likely into bondage, if you're asking me. I hope this makes any sense. There are always a bit of a separation within all of us. One of the reasons why I pointed this out to you as well, which I thought was fascinating.
I'm the one who's having to give the boundaries to my 70-year-old parents.
Wow.
It's like, your dad watches porn on his tablet. Why is that my problem? Boundary! I don't care. And it's none of my business. He can do what he likes.
Fair enough.
Yeah, exactly. I'm having to teach them about boundaries and consent now.
Heaven on it, this isn't easy. And hence why us therapists keep on going on about repeatedly discussing things and putting the cards on the table so that you guys are safe and know what's going on. This fascinates me because, don't know if you know this, but it's called also the limbic system, because even the word was chosen because limb in limb comes from the word limbus, which is Latin for border, hedge, boundary. Hence, in medieval Latin, it was the area close to hell, hence why we got being in limbo. So it is all within us for generations that certain things are safer when they're separate. Can I give you a political example? Secularism, the separation between state, which is the public political forum, whereas the more personal, religious, spiritual paths. A lot of civilizations realize it's a good idea to have those two things separate. Otherwise, if we'd be all living under God's law and the interpretations, it's going to be difficult. And there are sadly so many examples here. I hope I haven't lost you guys. I hope this makes sense. I always thought this is useful, especially when you guys are trying to really get to know yourselves and find out what works for you. Just to make sure that boundaries aren't overstepped. Thank you for letting me geek out. The old Greeks, they called it ecos, which is the family lineage of the private home life. Hence why we've got economia, economy, and ecology, as opposed to polis, metropolis, the public life. And us Kingsters, we call it code switching, when we need to be aware how are we behaving according to the social situations. So that ends my TED talk. It's a lot of practice.
Kirsty, with that, is there any evidence that different people have different endorphin surge rates? Because endorphins are a huge part of what we do.
Yeah.
I get a lot from gym, I get a lot from dancing, I get it from this. Sometimes I wonder whether I just have this higher than average endorphin surge capacity. I don't know if that's true or not. Is there evidence of that?
It could be your endocrine household. You know, a lot of people quite like having higher dopamine levels and experiencing a good rush, whereas others have a lower than standard. Work with it. So, how does this show?
It's very existential. The world's not there.
Okay.
All there is the action. In the moment of action, all there is action. In the moment of the circuit in the gym, that's all there is. When I'm dancing and music, there's just the music. When I'm doing some of this kink stuff, I sometimes say I become one with the cane.
You become
One with the cane.
nice.
There's the moment where there's nothing else happening but that physical act. And I associate that with endorphins, so,
Okay.
or dopamine, so I don't know whether it's cane.
It's a perfect coping mechanism. When you've got too much dopamine, and when you get the caning, and you're feeling better afterwards, that is a perfect definition of kink play that works. So, does it show somehow else when you've got heightened dopamine levels? Or is this just in the context, just out of interest, or is this just in the context of kink play?
Similar in terms of where I feel. The thinking part of my brain is just gone, it's not there. It's partly what some people call subspace. But the idea of subspace when you're dancing, subspace when you're in the gym, I do get that. And the circuit, there's certain kinds of patterns of exercise where the heart rate is high and I'm just up here, I'm loving it, I'm smiling despite the exhaustion.
Good.
Smiling despite
Good.
the pain.
To me, it sounds a bit like a flow state, like a meditation
Yes.
state. So to me, like I would get that from meditation. You can actually train your attention and awareness to unify that creates that.
Yeah.
When you say I'm one with that, there's
Nothing else is happening.
yeah, it's like a flow state. And
Yeah.
You can train those states, or you can find them in places like
Yeah.
I
exercise.
think I've discovered it rather than training myself.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's one of the definitions, thank you, it's one of the definitions of the flow state, a state of effortlessness. Where you don't even need to try, it just works, it just flows. And this usually happens when you're focused right in the moment and you don't think, you don't overthink. You're focused in the moment, you don't need to try, and it seems like a flow-like state. Yeah.
Those two aspects of my life now. My life is a more physical life than
Yeah.
it was 3 years ago. It was a more intellectual life. After I lost my husband, I became more into the physical life and less thinking. It was a coping mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it worked. And I was just surprised how those 3 different things
Yeah.
each had that.
By the way, in terms of neurodivergence, this is also something that helps many people. The point of meditation is you purposefully pick something you focus on. And by this, you deflect from all of the stress factors, doubts, and noises up here. And you stay there, and you practice staying there. And the more you practice this, eventually your dopamine levels and your stress levels, your cortisol levels especially, they come down. And people are a bit much more themselves or centered, as the Buddhists call it. And this is pretty much the equivalent of subspace, when people just really relax and they don't have the stress anymore. I do recommend meditate regularly, guys, or tell your Dom what exactly you need when your stress levels are too high, so that you can go to this subspace, to that flow space. Yeah.
I'm kind of like a little bit confused. It's like when you're in like subspace or dom space, isn't it more like high intensity rather than something that's like calming you?
It's focus. Yeah.
Okay.
You are in that moment, and anything else is in the background, but you are there.
And that's like a form of like calm in a sense, because like you're so focused on like what you're doing in that moment.
Flow space is when you don't need to try, whereas the subspace possibly has a bit of more of an emphasis of being calm and feeling safe as well. It's not exactly the same, yeah.
You can get it deep clean in the kitchen.
Sorry?
You can get it deep clean in the kitchen. That's all I'm doing. I'm just cleaning the kitchen. I'm not thinking about cleaning the kitchen. I'm just doing it. That comes a bit from S-curve, obviously skills. They're how it's done in our training. In the moment of action, action is all there is. And that can be something as ordinary as cleaning the kitchen. When you're doing that, you're not doing anything else. You're just doing that.
Do you think the appeal of being a dom is compared to the appeal of being a sub?
Now that's a question. You do realize you'd have to ask various DOMs and subs, because
but like, you know, there are definitely like some common factors in each.
in both, I would say, catharsis, people feel usually so much better and awesome when the session really worked. And it's also about a bond. What I like about kink play is the tremendously intense bond we can feel. I'm not judging about people who do vanilla sex, but I do say what we do is so much more physical, is so much more intense. And if the point of view is from the dom who does do the action and is in a powerful position, or if it is the sub who's actually in a much more powerful position. But I do think it's much more intense. How it is like for a dom, you'd have people have got their own. You see the way why someone is more dominant, why someone is more submissive, or indeed why someone likes to switch. There are all kinds of reasons. The whole point is that people get a kick out of it. Otherwise, what's the point?
It's got to be fun.
Seriously, it should be fun. It should be horny. If it isn't, you know, so. But it's a good question. Ask around, and you're going to get a whole raft of different answers. I just really like it. I find it very, very satisfying. Plus, I've always been a bit of a spoiled brat, I guess, from childhood days onwards. So if someone polishes my boots nicely, it's lovely. To give you my answer, you know. My sub actually said, when he licks and polishes my boots, he said, hell, when I'm subbing for you, I'm just meditating. I'm just relaxing. I just can be. And I always thought that is quite a nice answer, you know. And I think this is what it's about, that we can just let ourselves go a bit and feel safe while doing it. So, yeah. Yeah.
So I'm a switch, so I'm familiar with being submissive, and I'm also familiar with being dominant. And I think in the subspace that I'm in, it's kind of, I relinquish that control basically. So from like the trauma therapy that I've done, that would put me in a hypo-arousal state where I'm calm, where I don't have to make any decisions, where I don't have to think too much. I can just feel. And then when I'm in the dominant side, it's like I can indulge my people-pleasing, my control issues, possibly a little bit of my obsession and my hyper-focus and my attention to detail because I'm responsible for this person. But I'm also hyper-focusing on their reactions to what I'm doing to them. Yeah. So for me, it's I balance those two aspects of my senses, my emotions, and in my brain as well. It's, you know, what does my brain want to do today? Does my brain want to relax, or does my brain want to feel in control? And you'll find different answers from different people. But I'll say, for me as a switch, it's basically balancing and grounding all those aspects and making me feel whole.
Nice. Would you allow me to elaborate on the people-pleasing thing? Sure. Which is quite interesting. Have you got any perfectionists, any people-pleasers? Okay. I could be on my soapbox about this. Please don't, for particular reasons. Especially for kink relationships. Don't be a people pleaser, because the more, if you're getting a sexual kick out of it, then yes. If not, you're going to vanish as a person within your friends, within your family members, even for your play partners. It is precisely when you say no, when you give a clear boundary, where you appear as a person. People pleasing is always at the expense of your own self. And I've noticed people with perfectionistic tendencies tend to really overemphasize to make everyone else happy. This is about you being happy with your play partners together. So this is one of the healthy definitions of our relationship. It should be 50-50 in terms of input. However it manifests sexually, that's a different ballgame according to your agreements. But don't be a perfectionist here, because perfectionism is always coming with inhumane priorities. It always comes with inhumane characteristics. It never really respects the biological frame we have. Listen to your bodies. This is one of the reasons why I said this. Our heads will tell us, no, I'm going to do some more working. No, I'll be able to take another 10 canings. Listen to your bodies. We always have got a biological frame we need to operate in. Our minds, however, will get towards those 100% that we're idealizing up here, and that's dangerous. This is about being our authentic self. You don't need to idealize yourself and your partners. Get to know yourselves how you truly are, not how you would like yourselves to be, or how you would ultimately your partner like to be. This is one of the differences here. Hence why a perfectionistic mindset is a bit, can be quite dangerous here.
I would not regard myself as a people pleaser when you look at the way I live. But when I'm engaging in this, I regard what I do as an act of giving, a gift. I'm giving myself,
Yeah.
my body, my time, to give them pleasure. I think if I was a Dom, I would have the same perspective.
Yeah.
And when you said about a bond, the type of stuff I do, quite heavy impact play, there's a bond. It's like a dance, where two of you dance and you're dancing together.
Yes, it's about the bond.
That's a strong bond. Yeah. You can have friendships with people who somebody who's just given you a bloody good idea, and yet the bond you have, the friendship. It's not words, it's too strong a word.
It could be love.
It could be. It can be.
But it's an intense bond.
There is a with an affection.
Yeah.
And a small a hug afterwards.
And it's on a spectrum.
Yeah.
You know, it's a big emotional spectrum. So.
I learned very early on naturally without thinking about it. Somebody asked what I was doing was giving. When I take my shirt off and do that, I'm giving and saying
cool.
It's not the same as submission, it's a bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
I think the difference between engaging correctly in a relationship compared to people pleasing is whether you want to give up that part or that time with yourself. Because when it's people pleasing, you kind of have this internal battle going on to betray yourself so that this person stays with you, so that they like you. It's I don't really want to do this, but that person's going to like it, so I might as well just part with it. That's what people pleasing is. When you actually like someone, you actually want to do something. Yes, I want to do it, and I like this person, and it's going to be great. You don't have any doubt in you.
How do you feel afterwards? This is when it really shows.
Yeah.
If you want to do a favor for someone because you really love and care about your friend, perfectly fine. Watch how you feel afterwards. This is really the proof. One of the reasons why the people-pleasing thing can be so dangerous is people can easily feel used. And they're aware of this in hindsight knowledge. And by then it's usually too late. Hence why I said it should be 50-50 in terms of how much someone contributes in a relationship. So do the people-pleasing, but make sure it isn't at the expense of your own self. So
for me, it's how they respond, though.
Sorry?
It's how they respond. So if you're being a people pleaser and then they don't respond in the right way, you can feel you.
It's about the balance. Yeah. If someone only responds because he or she needs a favor again, my red flags would go up. And this is basically where I'm drawing a bit the attention to, trust me, there's no shortage in opportunistic arseholes at the moment. So again, I sound cynical. So
relationships aren't transactional. It's not a transaction. If I buy a friend a really good lunch, I don't expect them to.
Precisely. Love ultimately should be unconditional. Yeah.
You spoke about intensity and then you spoke about balance. Kink is quite an intense thing to do. How do you balance that if you're saying a 24/7 relationship? I haven't been in a kink relationship yet, but I've done kinky things. But yeah, it's just that understanding of, you've got places like here where you can experience that and you can try it, but when you're at home, are you using that same bed as somewhere you might have just normal sex, vanilla sex, or are you using it as you always have to be in a kink state. I just wanted to wonder what your view was about that.
I always was critical about the 24 hours, 7 days a week thing. If it works for people, awesome. But usually what I gather is people need a bit of a break then and when. Yeah, not everyone is constantly in the kink space. Otherwise, if you don't have an alternative, how much joy could you get to get back into kink space? Again, I'd say it's about the balance. Take regular breaks. And again, and your body would tell you this as well, what you feel like from day to day. There's so many variables where you wouldn't be able to keep it up.
Just because you like strawberry and chocolate doesn't mean you can't still like vanilla as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
For me, I have checks and balances. So if I was not in this space, I would become disconnected from my body and from other people.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm in this space, because I
Yeah.
know that's how my brain works. So there are my other vanilla activities that I like doing that take me out of this space, so that when I do come back to this space, I'm more present here.
Yeah.
And that helps me because, again, I'm not denying certain aspects of myself, but I'm staying in safe spaces where I can unmask for that, So in my mental health group, I can unmask, my neurodivergency, my mental health. In my religious spiritual groups, I can unmask there. And here I can unmask more intimate companion sensory needs that I might have.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a kink relationship, I was with my long husband 16 years. You can't do 24/7 kink. It's impossible because you've got work, you've got your everyday life. So we would rather leave it, for example, weekends where we do kink. If we were both off that weekend, then we do kink. Say do kink 24/7.
It's not something I want to do, it was just an extreme that I was saying.
It's not doable. There might be some aspects of it. So, for example, if you're a dom and you've got a sub, and you give your sub tasks in a week, that way it can work. But to play 24/7, it won't work.
It's hard work for the dom.
Yeah.
Thinking new things.
Nice one. Guys, any more questions? Yeah?
Different subject.
Go for it.
I was wondering if you could have any tips on staying present. Because what happens to me a lot of the time is, especially if the situation is more intense, I just zone out and I just like disassociate.
Okay.
And so yeah, any thoughts on that?
I would say even before you dissociate, see to use the safe word. It's a good idea to keep calmly breathing when you're close to dissociating. It might be a sign that you'll be overwhelmed in moments like this. It's usually a sign, it's usually a stress response when you dissociate.
I feel like it's just whenever it's just something intense, but it's not like I'm enjoying everything that's happening.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of intense emotions.
Okay.
That's what's causing it.
Do you discuss those emotions afterwards, after the session?
Not really.
I would recommend you do. It might be things that have been unprocessed, that might have accumulated. That was slightly surreal.
It was cosmic, what you expect.
Okay, was that a sign we need to wrap up?
It wasn't 5 minutes.
Darth Vader? He could have just said.
He just walked in a Covent Garden like that.
I bet he did. I bet he did. Is it? Oh, of course. Oh, God. Yeah. Okay. Yes. As I was saying, see to discuss it. This is part of the process as well. Because anything that is unprocessed is going to be a distraction, and it can contribute that you're going to feel overwhelmed and that you possibly dissociate.
Right. But so like in the moment though, do you think it's better to just stop and
Yeah, listen to your gut feeling. If especially if you're feeling overwhelmed and if it gets unpleasant, take a bit of a break. Or you can really focus on your deep belly breaths so that you ground yourself physically. that usually helps many people as well from just zoning out. But be rather safe than sorry and take a bit of a break. So, nice one. Guys, my energy levels, they're stooping as well. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.